am thrilled this week to be chatting with Cody. Cody joins us from a number of different areas of expertise, and most sort of applicable right now with INcommunities. So hi, Cody. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's really my pleasure to be able to chat, anytime about volunteerism, but certainly during these very different. I think the word that keeps being batted around is unprecedented. During these unprecedented times that we are currently living in. But yeah, my name is Cody Palmer Almond. I'm a special projects coordinator with INcommunities, which happens to be the local volunteer center for the Niagara Region. We have a number of different other programs as well, including the 2-on-1 service. But volunteerism is really my passion, and one of the exciting reasons I get to partner with INcommunities and work with them on the great things that they're doing for Niagara. Myself, volunteerism sort of runs deep in my blood. I have been involved in volunteerism since I was young. It was sort of a family affair. Got involved with the Niagara Great Wine Festival from a very young age. One of the things I sometimes do or don't share is the fact that I actually became very organically involved because I was the Great Prince when I was 7 years old. A little bit of grape royalty, I guess, back when there was a whole royal family. But so that just naturally became involved in the festival from that point forward, and then expanded to be involved in a number of other organizations. One of my most favorite causes that I've been involved with is Kids Help Phone. I've been involved with them for about 20 years here in the Niagara region, supporting our Walk for Kids Help Phone each year, and some other fundraising efforts. So yeah, it's one of those things that definitely runs true to me. I'm an educator as well, so I understand the importance of youth volunteerism and getting involved in communities. So I'm excited to chat all about it today.
Amazing, yes. Next Niagara is really excited to bring to our audience sort of a topic of, not just volunteering in a normal time, and the importance of it and all of that, but during these unprecedented times. And yeah, I'm so excited to chat with you about sort of what that can look like for people, and the impact that it has, and sort of bring and share your wealth of knowledge to our viewers. So my first question for you is, knowing that you have sort of a number of different avenues that you bring your experience from, so you can feel free to touch from like a personal but also a professional perspective of what volunteering sort of means to you, but also your organization as in INcommunities or any other sort of work that you do, and what sort of impact from your perspective it has on anybody.
Absolutely. So when I say sort of it runs in my blood, and it just has been one of those natural things, is very true. As I said, I've been involved with it from a very young age, and always tried to be involved in as many organizations and as many causes as I can be. And I think it's for a number of different reasons. One of the reasons that I think for me, I always found it important was it was an opportunity to connect, opportunity to grow, but more importantly, it was an opportunity to give back. There's an opportunity to be able to support the work of organizations. One of the things that I've now learned as I've grown older and had a chance to be employed in the voluntary sector is that there are so many organizations and so many services that are available all across the province, all across the country, that would just not exist without the support of volunteers. And so that's one of the things that becomes very important and very apparent as I think you become more and more involved or learn more about volunteerism. So for me, that's one of the things that it means to me, is the opportunity that organizations can continue to provide services. One of the challenging pieces of that is support for those volunteers. And so I've been lucky enough to work with a number of organizations that support directly or indirectly volunteer managers or managers of volunteer resources as well, because one of the things that often gets lost in the conversation around volunteers is that professional aspect, and the fact that when you have an organization that requires 100, 200, 500 volunteers, there needs to be someone driving that ship. and it's a very important aspect of volunteerism that sometimes gets left behind. So that's one of the things I wanted to make sure that I had a chance to shine a spotlight on. For me, from a professional standpoint, I had a chance to work with INcommunities a number of years ago for the first time on a project that used to run across the province of Ontario called Change the World. Change the World was a youth volunteer challenge, and it was designed to somewhat support the 40 hours requirement for high school youth, but it was really designed to get individuals, young adults, involved in their communities and helping to give back and helping to learn more about the impact of volunteerism. So I had a chance to participate in that, which was a partnership between local volunteer centers and the Ontario Volunteer Center Network, which was a provincial organization that supported volunteerism all across Ontario. From that point, I was able to actually do some shared work with OVCN at the provincial level, and then move to being the general manager of the Ontario Volunteer Center Network for a number of years, which was really rewarding, very exciting to be a part of that. One of our big deliverables during that time was delivering close to 25,000 certificates of recognition to volunteers that participated in the Para-Pan Am Games. And so that was a really exciting initiative that we undertook. And one of the things that I always like to highlight whenever I talk about that is that these were not traditional sort of volunteer appreciation certificates where it was just the person's name and their role with the organization, but it was a very detailed report of the activities that they undertook, the skills that they developed and demonstrated during that role, and any special certifications that they achieved or things like that. So it really went to another level to really recognize the impact of volunteerism. That's one of the challenges that volunteerism as a whole often faces, is how do we encompass the impact that volunteers have? And so for me, that was a real passion of mine, and that's why I was really excited to be a part of that project during that time. And it'll be sort of, as I grow old, one of the things that I'll get to look back on and always cherish that I was able to be a part of. Now my role has shifted to some work with special projects at INcommunities, one of which is helping to support them as a volunteer center. And so one of the things that they offer throughout the Niagara region are resources and a database of volunteer opportunities for a number of organizations across Niagara, and supports to those both organizations and volunteers looking to get involved.
That's amazing. So many great points there. I think one thing that you touched on that I think is really interesting and often does get missed. I also work in nonprofit, and so I see this at times as well, is just sort of that undervalued aspect of volunteers and the people managing them or coordinating them, and how much of an impact that truly does have on an entire organization, and then what the people that organization ultimately help, right? So very, very important. So yeah, thanks for touching on that. So talking a little bit more about the times that we're in, I think that many people right now may be feeling or believing that volunteering isn't really possible during this time, which of course has an incredible negative impact on our community, our organizations, and the volunteers themselves and their sort of well-being. So from your point of view, Cody, what sort of impact has COVID-19 had on volunteering in organizations locally and non-locally? And is it true that people can't volunteer right now?
So great questions, and certainly, yeah, and it's such an important thing to address. And I think that, as with much of the information that is coming out during this pandemic, it's ever changing. And I know that that's not always not the best answer that people like to hear, but it is often changing. And I think organizations, especially, and I would say especially even nonprofits more so than some of the business community, are adapting at their own pace and at their own ability. And so one of the things that I would say is that volunteering never stops. And so that's one of my big take-home messages that I would say, regardless of what the situation that's occurring, volunteerism remains a key aspect of our identity as Canadians. We have National Volunteer Week every single year in April to recognize the impacts and the contributions of volunteers nationwide. And the reason that we have that is because volunteering is such an inherent aspect of Canadian life. And so what I would say is that volunteerism doesn't stop in the time of a pandemic. It just changes. And that's one of the biggest things that we are seeing. And so not only does the way it takes place change, but also the focus. So one of the things that certainly has gotten a lot of attention over the past few months has been support for seniors. We see a lot of information about long-term care homes and seniors struggling, especially during this pandemic. And there's certainly an at-risk population in the best of times. And so when we look at a situation like we are facing in today's world, they need extra supports even more so now. And so a lot of the organizations that work with seniors are still requesting support, are still looking for assistance. But again, it's that shift in how it looks and how it operates. And so what I would encourage volunteers to do is, if you're interested in getting involved, whether it be because you have a passion, because you want to give back, in some cases because you have some extra time on your hands right now because of whatever situation you're in, there are opportunities out there. Take a look. Our database at INcommunities has a number of opportunities. A lot of the organizations have been good about updating either their website or some of their opportunities about whether they are still actively looking for supports during this pandemic. One of the other resources that I would point people to is a provincial database called Spark Ontario. It's received a lot of publicity over the past few weeks. It received some financial support from the Ontario government to actually provide more impact and more resource for Ontarians looking for opportunities to get involved. And so they have a whole section of their website which is dedicated to volunteering during COVID-19. The other resources that are out there include some things from Volunteer Canada. So if you're an organization that works with volunteers and are looking for some guidance, for some support in how to engage volunteers, or some of the do's and don'ts, Volunteer Canada is always a plethora of resources for volunteer leading organizations, but especially during times such as these where things are changing so often. And Volunteer Canada is a national organization that works very closely with government agencies and understands, what can and cannot happen. But I think, as much as I want to continue encouraging people, if you are interested in getting involved, reach out. One of the best ways during a time like this, where social distancing is so important, physical distancing and crushing the curve and all of these things that we do want to do as a population and as a community, virtual volunteering is an opportunity to get involved in ways that are non-traditional. And so virtual volunteering opportunities also exist out there. So there are a number of organizations that offer these, and again, those can be found through any of the databases I've mentioned. It's just another way to get involved for people that maybe don't want to undertake some of the new precautions and some of the new processes that would be involved with some in-person volunteering. So I would say that it's a very long way around of saying that volunteerism never stops, but it does shift and it does change. And the best thing you can do is educate yourselves by reaching out to organizations and seeing what's going on still.
Mm-hmm. Those are great points. I think awesome for you to touch on both, resources for organizations, because, realistically, organizations and volunteer managers are going through quite a time, I'm sure, in trying to adapt very quickly. But also volunteers. So kind of connecting those two pieces during this time. And yeah, I think just reaching out to, I think of, people who are, just out of school, or maybe have more time off of work at the moment and maybe haven't volunteered in the past, but they've always wanted to. And I think just like you said, just reaching out and taking that step in an organization that you seem interested in is a great first step for people.
And what I would say oftentimes happens, we used to talk a lot at the provincial level about barriers to volunteerism. And one of the biggest barriers, honestly, is that first step, that first call, that first email, that first message. That's the biggest barrier. And so this is a great opportunity that even if you don't feel comfortable volunteering now, or the organization that you find your passion in doesn't have opportunities available during this pandemic, it's a great time to make that first connection, because that connection is huge and could pay amazing dividends down the road.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a statistic out there, and I don't know the numbers, but about the number of people who don't volunteer, and it's, they break it down for all the different reasons, but one of a big reason is no one ever asked them. And
yeah.
When I first heard that statistic, I was blown away that I don't remember the percentage, but the number of people who no organization ever reached out to them. And that's a barrier, right? Of just connecting those two groups of people. And the more we can sort of break that down, the better off everybody is.
Absolutely.
So I would say in any economic situation, let alone one like we're in right now, many people, many Canadians believe that volunteering can play a positive role in job searching, and sort of your career down the line, and how volunteering now could affect that in a positive way. Can you touch on this in any way?
Absolutely. It's actually one of the things that I've had a chance to talk about in the past with different organizations, and it's such an important piece. And I think that we often talk about, one of the ways I would frame it is, we often talk about it for youth. We talk about the fact that, it's a great opportunity for youth to build opportunities for experience and exposure to different things. But that is true about any age group and any vocation. I always say that volunteering is a great way to have 10, 12, 20 part-time jobs. Mm-hmm. It's a great way to figure out what you want to do, what your passion is, what you're interested in, gain new skills, hone and demonstrate your skills. And that's one of the reasons why, for instance, when I talked about the certificates that we handed out as part of Pan Am were so important, because they did focus on the skills that were demonstrated in those roles. Mm-hmm. As a way of putting that forward. There's a lot of work across the voluntary sector, across not only Ontario, but also at the national level, around the professionalism of volunteerism. And there's a lot of focus on trying to connect the business and employment world to the value of volunteerism. Mm-hmm. and helping not only the individuals that are doing the volunteering to understand that benefit and that experience, but having it to translate beyond 2 or 3 lines on a resume, which is often what it boils down to. So you can have 20 plus years of volunteerism in very high level roles with organizations, but often what it comes down to when you're submitting a resume is you've got 3 or 4 bullet points underneath your volunteer experience area. And it's so much more than that. It's worth so much more than that. And when we look at the organizations, especially service organizations, in not only in times of need like now, but anytime, the roles that people undertake at those organizations that are voluntary are so important and so integral to the day-to-day operations of that organization that those services would not exist without the volunteers. So being able to somehow capture that and tell that story to the employment sector is key, because experience as a volunteer, I've seen with young people and older people alike, sometimes their experience in voluntary situations has been more rich than any of their past employment experience. And as a person who has held interviews and looked at candidates for jobs, I look at both things with equal weighting. when I'm looking at who I would like to work in our team, because not only does it tell us something about a person's experience, but oftentimes it gives you a glimpse into that person as an individual and as a team member. And I think that's the thing as well that I would like to highlight, is the fact that your interest and involvement in your community tells a lot about you as an individual and as a human. And we know that when we're hiring, when we're looking at people to join teams, it's about skills, certainly, and experience, but it's also about being a team member. Mm-hmm. And volunteerism allows us to gain insight into both of those things at once.
Amazing. Yes, learning how to articulate that so that it can jump over from I was just a volunteer here to this is how it impacted who I am and how I can benefit this role, etc. That's awesome. So Cody touched on lots of different resources for individuals as well as organizations. Are those what you would say are the best ways for people to get involved with local organizations, even right now? Or do you have any other, even separate from that, just tips or tricks or last sort of pieces of advice for people before we close off?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, certainly I mentioned the INcommunities database. I mentioned Spark Ontario, which is more of a province-wide opportunity and has a little bit more virtual volunteering. Those two are really, really key to finding some opportunities, some really good matches for your interests. One of the great things about the INcommunities database is it's a volunteer matching sort of center. So it allows you to focus on skills you're interested in and allows you to look at the times you are available and the organizations that maybe match your passion. So it really allows you to hone in on those things that will make not only the organization provide them some experience and some satisfaction, but also especially yourself with some satisfaction. Because I think that when we look at volunteerism, it's 100% a two-way relationship. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that there are so many amazing managers of volunteers out there, not only across Niagara, but all across the province, that understand that and understand the importance of, a volunteer that is working in a place where they have passion or in a role where they have passion enriches not only the services of that organization, but the life of the volunteer. And so I think that that's a really key piece when you are looking at volunteerism is find your passion and find something that interests you and use that as a jumping off point for getting involved. What I will say is for organizations that are looking for a little bit more support, there is a great organization, community group called the Regional Association of Volunteer Administrators, RAVA for short. It's a great network of volunteer administrators all across the Niagara region that meet and share resources and access professional development. It's a great opportunity to continue to support the work that they do to engage all of the volunteers across Niagara. From a volunteer's perspective, I know I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think it's about reaching out and getting involved. But even before that happens, just a little bit of learning. I think learning is so key, and I think we're in a certainly a generation where we're lifelong learners, and I think that is becoming more and more important. And I think that as the times change and technology changes and the world around us is ever changing, we're starting to realize more and more that lifelong learning is the only way to really succeed and to move forward. And so I would say that learning about volunteerism and about the organizations that are out there is a great first step, and certainly something that, as I mentioned before, if you're not looking to get directly involved at this time, or you don't have the means or the opportunity to get involved at this time, that learning is something that you can take a little bit to access at this point in time as well. So I would say that those are the key aspects. I think that one of the things that for me is so important is volunteerism, not because you have to do it, but because you want to do it. And so that's one of the things that I had a chance for my master's to look at the 40 hours requirement in schools. And one of I think the challenges in the 40 hours requirement is it's become too prescriptive and not explorative enough, and not enough of a learning opportunity for those students. And so I would say that sometimes happens with adults as well. Is there's this sense of, I need to get involved because I need to get involved. Mm-hmm. It needs to be something deeper than that, or else you won't realize that symbiotic relationship with the organization that you're with, or you'll end up working with an organization that isn't a right fit. And the volunteer experience, it's like anything. It only takes one bad experience to color that for the rest of your life. So the way to help support a good experience your first time out and every time beyond that is to make sure that it's a good fit for both you and the organization.
Amazing. So many great touch points or starting off points for people and organizations, and a lot of tangible, I think, things that people can go and do right now that doesn't necessarily even feel overwhelming. It's just learning, it's just reaching out, it's just finding out what you're passionate about. So thank you so much, Cody. That was fantastic. We're very humbled to have your expertise and your wisdom in our area and connected with Next Niagara now. So thank you to everybody who watched this episode of We Are Next, and to watch our other videos or to connect with us in other ways, check out our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the pages. We'd love to hear from you. And one last time, thank you so very much, Cody. And I hope to see you in person sometime soon.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Awesome.